This is the pyramid of Kukulkan, which is the Mayan name for Quetzalcoatl, which means feathered snake. It's in Chichen Itza, and this is ground zero. This is where I'm going to be next week, along with 80 million other crazy people. And this particular calendar has 91 steps up this side and 91 steps up the other three sides, which makes 364. And supposedly, with the extra step at the top, it makes a calendar. Maybe. Down the side, it's got this stairway that has snakes at the bottom, and on the afternoon of the equinox, sun comes around, casts a shadow on the side of that thing that looks like, let's see here. It's called The Descent of the Serpent of Light and Shadow. I think it's an accident. The Maya are very unknown people. We have projected upon them all of our fantasies because we know almost nothing about them. They were a great civilization, and one of the reasons that I wrote my book about the Maya 2012 prophecies and so forth was because we know so little about them that we project on this idea that they're prophets of doom. And we know that they had a ball game, and we know that they did sacrifice, and they had this calendar, and everything else is fantasy. Anyway, this is one of the cool things they did. This is a monument. It's a single piece of stone. It's in Quirigua. You see the guy standing up there for scale? It's called a stela, and the Maya put up these monuments to celebrate their kings doing ceremonies to talk to the gods to protect their people. That's why the kings were there. That's why kings are kings, because they can talk to the gods and we can't, right? Anyway, this is the kind of thing that we can't even imagine doing today, carving a 35-foot monument out of stone. And the Maya were a fabulous, fascinating people. They were a Stone Age culture. They were able to do all of this, what shall I say, without metal, without the wheel. They were in fact, probably the most advanced culture as far as complexity and interesting technology and that sort of thing that never attained the use of metals. And you all know this thing, right? You see it on the backs of vans everywhere. It used to be colored, and the Aztec sunstone here has got a ring around here that's recently been deciphered. There it is, sort of separated out, and we've deciphered it, and here's what it says. But I want to say that the Aztecs were as related to the Maya as the medieval Spanish were to the ancient Romans. There was a heritage there, but the difference is 600 years and hundreds of miles. And of course, you all hear about the end of the Maya calendar, and this is the kind of thing we expect to happen on that day. Not. The Maya actually never predicted an end of time. They never predicted an end of their calendar, and they never predicted an end of their civilization. That idea was talked about at the beginning of this century by some scholars. They said, oh, the Maya have a cycle of 5,000 years that ended in 3114 BC. And it's been counting up. It was like a clock at midnight. The calendar went to 13 times 400 years plus 0, 20 years, 0 months, 0 days. 13, 0, 0, 0, 0. That was the date, August 11th, 3114 BC. And the next day was 0, 0, 0, 0, 1. It was like midnight. Clock went after 13. And it has been 5,125 years and 133 days since then. And the Maya calendar is now at 12, 19, 19, 17, and some change. And very soon it will be 13, 0, 0, 0, 0 again. And that is the entire source of the idea that the Maya calendar comes to an end, because it reaches that number that it ended at before. What am I doing wrong? Oh, sorry. Keep me in the light. Walk towards the light. Let's move on here. The Maya never predicted an end, but we thought they did. There were some scientists speculated for about 50 years that the Maya had this calendar of 5,000 years that ended in 2012 and it would start again. And then they found an inscription that said, no, they didn't. But by this time, the idea had gotten out into the mainstream. And so this whole idea that the calendar has an end comes from a mistake that scientists have talked among themselves and said, oh, I used to think that, but I don't think that anymore. But the public is like, I read it in a book. The scientist said it. Anyway, it's a misconception that we've since gone beyond, but the public hasn't gotten the memo. I wanted to briefly show you a little bit of difference about the early civilization of the prehistoric Mesoamericans were the Olmecs. They're the cultura madre, the mother culture. And they lived there. They're about the time, you see I have a date here, down here, 1500, 400 BC. The Maya, 1,000 years later, different civilization, different language, different culture, built on the Olmecs. The Olmecs were the first people to write, the first people to build pyramids, the first people to play the ball game. Everything that we think of as Mesoamerican was invented by the Olmecs. The Maya took it, they changed it, and this is what we call the late classic period. All the orange spots are little cultures that were like sprouting up like mushrooms. And the great culture of the Maya was at its height. And they called it the classic period because the Maya were then. That's when they thrived, between the time of Christ and 900 AD. And then they fell. They destroyed their ecology. They put too, what should I say? They put too many buildings up. They used too much, what should I say? Is that 10 minutes left, or I've used 10 minutes? They put too many buildings up. They burned up too many of their trees, and they weren't ready when a drought came. And they died by the thousands. And they actually had to abandon their cities about the year 900. So they destroyed themselves. Sound familiar? The Aztecs came along, a different culture yet, and they were ruling when the Spanish came, and the Spanish destroyed them. And that was really the end of their world, about 1521. What makes the Maya so magnificent is, among other things, is they created a technology that allowed them to live in the jungle and to build these fabulous cities in the jungle in a place where people still don't live in the same population density as they had then. And they made, you can see here, that the city that's been dug out here is Tikal, and they've left a lot of the trees, but basically the Maya cleared the trees and built this sort of civilization with trees far around it. But to live in the jungle, how many people have been to Chichen Itza or Palenque or down there? Do you remember how hot it was? Do you remember how you always were sweating? And it's amazing that people could live like that all their lives. That's why they went almost naked. But yeah, go to mayavase.com to look for Maya paintings. Trust me. And they made... The mayavase.com is a great database made by Justin Kerr, a photographer who invented a way to take a picture of a round thing and have it spin around on a turntable with film going past a slit, so you actually have a flat, rolled-out photograph of the vase. And so you get a painting of the whole vase, 1,200 DPI wide. It's very nice website. 1,800 pictures. It's a great resource. And they made gods of things that were in the jungle, the jaguar, the snakes, centipedes, things that we go, ew. They made gods. And they made beautiful art. This is a roll-out photograph of a vase. Here's the lid of the vase, and you see it's got this wonderful spiral. And then the spiral continues down the sides, and it's partly painted with plaster and partly sculpted. And it's just a wonderfully sophisticated combination of different textures and colors. And their writing, these little cartouches, little circles here, are the hieroglyphs of the Maya. And they talk about the dedication of the vase. The vase, by the way, was a chocolate vase. That's the glyph for chocolate. The word chocolate, by the way, is an Aztec word. The Maya word for the same stuff is cacao, which is also an English word. It's the name for the plant. It's one of the few words. Another Maya word that we use today is shark. That's a Mayan word. Hammock is a Mayan word. All these inventions. Cigar. I could keep going. The Maya, despite the fact that they were a Stone Age culture who didn't have the wheel, were able to do sophisticated things with numbers and with the sky. This is an eclipse table. And it contains numbers like this. This is base 20, so that's 16. 6 is above that. 8 is above that, and 1. That's 16 ones, 6 20s, 8 400s, and 1 8,000. I mean, these are large numbers they're talking about. And these are all passages of time. And every glyph here that has a white and a black wing, that's the eclipse glyph. So this is a table of when to expect eclipses. They spent a lot of time looking at the sky, and they figured out, I mean, we could get it from the newspaper, but did anybody ever notice that eclipses of the moon happen every 6 months? Right? Every 6 moons, actually. So it happens just a little bit less than every 6 months. And the solar eclipses come 2 weeks before or 2 weeks after. Now, solar eclipses don't happen that often here. They happen somewhere on the Earth. But the Maya figured out when to expect an eclipse and to look for an eclipse, and they got really good at it. And that's kind of sophisticated. And they were working with these large numbers. And I want to say, these kinds of numbers work exactly the same as our numbers. Our numbers are in base 10 because we count on our fingers. Their numbers are in base 20 because they lived in a hot jungle and went barefoot. And they were able to use zero and place value to write numbers that are way longer than this. There's a Maya monument that has 24 digits, a number you're talking about a passage of time that is in the octillions of years, which is a billion times longer than the life of the universe. And they were like thinking in those terms. No other culture on Earth was so obsessed with time and the passage of time. And in fact, when they talked about intervals like this, these numbers here, these numbers are often perfect multiples of their magic numbers: 7, 9, 13, 260, 584, which is the cycle of Venus, 365. There's some amazing calculations in the millions and millions that was not possible with Roman numerals. As sophisticated as the Romans were, they had metal. But they did not have place value in zero, so they couldn't do the mathematics the Mayans could do. And so these guys were fabulous mathematicians and fabulous astronomers. And I want you to know that, of course, because everything was tied up with religion, they were also fabulous astrologers and fabulous numerologists. To them, the significance of a number was the factors that it contained. If it had a 9 in it, it had a 7 in it, it had a perfect square, all these things made these numbers pretty magical. And so they talked about things happening way in the future, way in the past, with these magic number dates. And this guy here, this is a sky band. There's the word sky. This is the word precious. This is the word darkness. Descending from the sky is a god whose head is the glyph for star. This is a star god. And he's descending from a sky band with eclipses hanging off it. And that's the glyph for the moon. Looks kind of like goofy grape. And the sun god. So we have eclipse of the sun and the moon. And they're all over the place if you look for them. There's a glyph for the sun, eclipses. So they were, by the way, we only have 4 books surviving from the Maya. And one of these is the Dresden Codex. It's in Dresden, Germany. And it has lots and lots of fascinating material in it. And to think that there were once hundreds of thousands of books, and all we have is 4, gives you some idea of what's been lost. Also, by the way, what has been saved is stuff made of stone and ceramic, sometimes wall paintings, depending on how well buried the buildings were. But the archaeology that has been done, we've only penetrated Maya civilization 1%. The city of Tikal, been digging at it since the 1930s. About 40 or 50 buildings have been dug up. There are another 3,960 to go. That's 1% has been dug up. The 99% is still waiting for our discovery. So that's why we keep discovering new stuff. And although there's whatever you hear about the Maya, it can change tomorrow with a new discovery. Come. To move on, here's one of the things that's going to happen this year. It's called a solar maximum. The solar maximum happens when the sun has storms, and it happens every 11 years. And solar storms send out charged particles, huge passes of charged particles, causes the northern lights, and it also affects communication satellites. And the last time we had a solar maximum was 11 years ago. It happens every 11 years. This is a cycle that astronomers know about. This solar maximum is coming in 2013. It used to be thought it was going to be 2012, but it's come late this year. But every 11 years we have a solar maximum, and these things affect things like communication satellites. Now, how many people did not have a cell phone 11 years ago? Right? Almost every time you make a phone call, if you make a phone call to your friend, right? Hey, listen to your voice on their phone. It's like a second delay. That's because it's going up 33,000 miles and back 33,000 miles to communication satellites, which are exposed above the Van Allen belts. They're going to be affected by the solar maximum. When you get cell phone going like this, right? This year, you know that it's because the Maya predicted it. Here's another thing that's happening this year. The Oreo cookie is now 100 years old, and this is the 2012 commemorative cookie. It's about time. So here's the date of creation. Remember that the date we're coming to is 13000, and here's the creation date that's also 13000. It's in the city of Quirigua. This is one side, and the other side of the monument there. Beautiful, beautiful monuments. By the way, down in San Diego, where I live, there's a museum called the Museum of Mayan. We have a replica, an actual cast of this monument, and about 6 other monuments, including the one the guy was standing on in the early pictures. So the Museum of Mayan has casts made about 100 years ago, 1914, for the World's Fair, when San Diego had the World's Fair. And so if you want to see these things up close, you don't have to go into the bug-infested jungle. So we know that here's the information that tells us why the Mayan calendar does not end. It's a beautiful temple. This is Palenque, one of the greats. It's called the Athens of America. It's a city filled with beautiful sculpture. And this is the tomb of a king called Pakal. Stairway up the side. I don't know how many steps there are, but it's not a real interesting number, or somebody would have said so. But it does have 9 steps, just like the pyramid of Kukulkan and Chichen Itza. You climb up to the top, there's some beautiful long inscriptions. It's called the Pyramid of the Inscriptions. And up in the top room, they have these long texts, which we'll look at. And if you then go down, there's a stairway down that goes all the way back down to the ground, and there's a tomb at the bottom. It was like the King Tut of Mexico, found in 1952. Fabulous tomb. King Pakal was a great king. And this is a little bit of his inscription. You can see it's carved kind of shallowly because there are this many glyphs. And this monument is about actual size on this slide. And there's 3 tablets like this. This is a 3rd tablet. And it talks about the future. It talks about the present time here. It talks about the future here. This is 9 years after the king died. This date. Have you seen these cute little happy faces? Those happy faces are all dates that are period endings, dates that end in 0. And this one over here, can I reach it? No. Oh, things going bad. Over here we have a date that's in the year 4772 AD. And they're also talking with some dates over here that are, 4772 is over here. And then there's some other dates. They're talking about the 14th Baktun. It literally says that after 130000, it will go to 14. And we'll go to 15, 16, and 17, and on up to 20. The year 20 is, of course, an extra, is counting in base 20, so it actually becomes the year 100000, which is 4772 AD. And they say the king will be gladdening the hearts of the gods at that time. Kings, of course, continue to take care of their people after death. They're telling us 2 things. They're telling us the calendar does not end at 13, it goes on to 14, and goes on up to 20. They're telling us that in the year 4772, 4,000 years in their future, that the Maya civilization will not have changed. The status quo remain the same. That's exactly the opposite of what everybody on the internet is saying. No galactic invitation. No end of the world. No solar flares. The Maya also, by the way, to just show you what great prophets they were, they didn't ever mention the Spanish conquest in their prophecies. Oops. This is a beautiful mural of Bonaparte. It shows some musicians and a guy dressed as a lobster. Every temple was painted like this, and very, very few, maybe 4, have some of the paintings surviving. And this is actually an enhanced photograph because the painting's been faded, but they have took photographs with infrared light and so forth. Anyway, this is the reason I wrote my book, was to say everybody's interested in the Maya, but they're so much cooler than people say they were. Thank you.